One of the oldest stories associated with hurling, and one of the most famous in Irish folklore, is the story of Setanta.
In the merry month of June, from my home I started, left the girl.
Amint Fescán na Graga, hurling in the shadow of the Rockies.
Hurling in the Shadow of the Rockies, the podcast engaging community through intimate stories of the individual, fostering their culture through hurling in the West.
I suppose they've taken to it like a duck to water.
I guess it was a big step. It was a big step bringing everybody together, getting the jersey.
Mad for going out and having a bit of crack, like, and having a bit of fun. But then knew then as well, like, look, we have to go to work now.
Instantly, all I could think was, this is like every sport I've ever played, all wrapped into one.
Is mis Donncha Ó Murchú as bla clia agus taman sa in Missoula in Montana agus me muoine gailne in Otscoil Montana. My name is Donncha Ó Murchú. I'm from Dublin in Ireland, and I'm here as a Fulbright Scholar for the year teaching Irish at the University of Montana.
Agus Misha Riabar O'Boyle, and I'm Bob O'Boyle. I'm an anthropologist from Montana. Welcome to the first episode of Hurling in the Shadow of the Rockies. We welcome you, and we really hope you enjoy this first episode. We're going to be giving you a little background about what we're all about. We're going to talk about some of the interviews, talk about some history, and so let's jump right in.
In Ulster, there was a young boy called Setanta, who was widely known for his hurling ability. At the time, the High King of Ulster, Conachúr Mac Nassa, had a special group of young boys whom he trained to become warriors that were known as the Macra. It had long been a dream of Setanta himself to join the Macra and to train as a warrior under Conachúr Mac Nassa, but his mother never let him go. Until one day, she finally relented, and Setanta set off in search of Conachúr Mac Nassa. With him, he had his hurl and a sliotar, and as he made his journey, he'd strike the ball high in the air and catch it on its stick before it hit the ground. Upon his arrival at Abhainn Mhacha, which is where Conachúr Mac Nassa had his keep, he came across a game of hurling being played out on the field in front of the keep. Without hesitating, Setanta joined the game and ran onto the field amongst the other boys, catching the ball. They were outraged at this stranger who'd come into their midst and interrupted their game, and instantly attacked him, throwing spears and shouting. Setanta defended himself, catching all spears on his shield and fighting off the hordes of boys who attacked him. Hearing the commotion, Conachúr Mac Nassa ran out into the field and saw Setanta defending himself against his boys. He was impressed at Setanta's determination and his bravery in the face of danger, and instantly allowed Setanta to join the Macra and train under his leadership. At this time, Colin, a man who was entrusted with making swords, spears and shields for Abhainn Mhacha and for the Macra, was hosting a feast in his own castle, and he invited Conachúr Mac Nassa and the Macra to join him. Setanta, who was also invited, was playing a game of hurling, therefore he'd be late to the feast. As the guests arrived, Colin invited them all into his banquet hall, and, forgetting about Setanta, he shut the doors of the castle and let loose his great hound, an Irish wolfhound, who guarded the castle at night. This hound was so fierce that no warrior would ever hope to survive being attacked. Before he released the hound, Colin warned everyone that was inside not to set foot out into the night, for this hound would tear anyone apart. Setanta finally arrived at the castle, late in the night, his hurl and his sliotar in his hand. He was greeted by the growling of the dog and turned to see the wolfhound racing towards him. From inside the keep, Colin and all the Macra heard the growling of the dog outside, and instantly Colin remembered Setanta. Meanwhile, as the dog raced towards him, Setanta had but a split second and instantly fired the sliotar straight down the dog's throat, killing it instantly. Colin, after hearing the snarls and the silence that followed, rushed outside with his guests, only to find Setanta, the young boy, standing alive with the great Irish wolfhound dead at his feet. Colin, despite being overcome with relief to see Setanta still alive, was filled with grief at the loss of his great wolfhound. However, sensing this, Setanta immediately stood before him and offered his services to guard the castle in place of the dog. From then on, Setanta was gifted the name Hurling, which means the Hound of Cullen. Hurling went on to become one of the greatest warriors in the history of Ireland.
That was Donncha telling the story of Setanta.
Well, to start, it's very important, I think, to get the story of hurling involved from the beginning, just to talk about the origins of the sport and how it came to be a competitive sport that really captured the minds of people at home.
Hurling is one of the oldest team games played in the world. It was played long before Ireland became a nation.
It's a stick and ball game which is played by tribes, between villagers, as a means to settle arguments, to train warriors.
There are many cultures who had this. It's not uncommon for traditional societies, tribal societies, to have these stick and ball games. The Choctaw had a stick ball game that they used sticks to move a woven leather ball up and down a field where they would try and knock it through goalposts. And it wasn't quite like hurling. You couldn't touch the ball with your limbs. You could only use the stick to move it down the field. Their stick was called a kabuka. But they had a traditional stick and ball game. The Cree Indians that occupied native North America, that still occupy native North America, have a stick and ball game called shinny. And it's actually very similar in a lot of ways. Even the sticks they used were very similar. The ball was soft. It was made out of leather, and it was two pieces of leather sewn together, stuffed with hair. But it was similar game. But again, like the Choctaw stick and ball game, you couldn't touch the ball with your hands at all. You had to use the stick. They had other games similar. They had one called Wipitsuiakan, also called the testicle game. It was two balls that were stuffed with hair that were thrown across a field and caught on sticks. They would get very far apart and throw these, but it was another traditional stick and ball game. You find these stick and ball games all throughout history, and so while we're focusing a lot on hurling, we're focusing on hurling for this particular podcast. This is kind of a universal story in a lot of ways, in that sports have shaped culture and been a part of culture for a very, very, very long time. In addition, why we talk about the uniqueness of hurling as this traditional Irish sport, there's also a universality to it. There's a shared history as people that we have in playing these games. And one of the beautiful things about hurling is that it's still played to this day. We have people playing hurling all over the world.
And then to build on that, how it spread with different changing climates in Ireland, people emigrated, what drew people away from Ireland and what made them take the sport with them. Obviously it was something that was very close to the heart, and people felt, even today, you sense that you could be anywhere in the world, but that when you play hurling, you're a little bit closer to home. And to trace it back to the first people, to the people who emigrated, maybe never to America, to Butte, for example, maybe never leaving their family at home, never seeing their family, knowing that they're never going to see their family again, but how they tried as much as they could to stay close to home, really, and to play a sport that would remind them of home and to make them feel a little bit closer to family. And then to build on that and to say how it has grown since then overseas. So in America, for example, to trace up as far as, how did it grow to kind of, how did hurling tradition settle itself in America, and how it became really a competitive sport today.
With this podcast, we will be bringing you the stories of the individuals who have made this saga. That story of hurling and how it's passed on and spread is not just a story of a game being played in different places. It's a story of individuals who are all part of the greater tale of hurling in the West.
And I suppose the aim, when I talk about hurling, something I've played all my life, at the core of hurling is this element of community. And that's really something that I'd love to convey in this podcast and in this project, to get people thinking about how special hurling is to the people who play it. Not only the people who play it, but the overall community in which it's being played. When you thinking about Ireland, doesn't matter where you're from the biggest city in the country, or from a small village in rural Ireland. Hurling is really the core of that community in a lot of cases, and you could have 1 million people in the city and still it would broken up into little districts, parishes, who everyone in that parish would be invested in the sport and in the team. And in many cases, when you start off hurling when you're 6 years of age, 5 years of age, you could finish your career and you'd still be playing with the same people you started with when you were a child, and that's something that's really special.
This season, we will really be looking at the development of hurling in Montana. We plan to continue to expand this to include many more places, but with this season, we really focus on how hurling was brought back to Montana.
You have a group of people who are playing the sport because they may only have started 2 years ago, but it's a sport they really love, and you can really sense that that's the sole thing that's driving them. It's not the tradition and their father and their grandfather and their mother and their grandmother might have played for the county, but there's no element of that involved. It's they're playing because they enjoy it, instead of, they don't feel like they have to play. They don't feel obliged to play because of the tradition in their family or because of the tradition of their town. So I think that really stands out, and I think that helps create and brings people together. I mean, I remember talking to a few of the people on the hurling team who'd say that they would never have met some of the other people on the team had it not been for the hurling team. They're coming from all different backgrounds, political backgrounds, cultural backgrounds. They may not agree on issues off the field, may not talk off the field, but as soon as they cross the white line, they really are teammates, and that obviously there's a serious loyalty and a bond there that really rings true, and it's very, very strong and very, very clear as soon as they take to the field, and that determination is there, the will to win is there, and they do anything. The loyalty is there for everyone around them.
With this season, we really focus on how hurling was brought back to Montana, a state rich in Irish tradition.
Obviously, there is that underlying, and it's really noticeable, that Irish connection with Montana, something I wasn't aware of when I came over. I'd heard of it, but I knew about the mines, but I didn't understand really how strong it was until I got to know people here, and how proud people are of that Irish heritage and of the culture with the working class of Ireland and the mines and the dedication of the people who work there.
The Irish roots in Montana go back well before statehood. One of the first territorial governors of Montana was none other than Thomas Francis Meagher. Meagher of the Sword, as he was known for his famous speech, came to Montana, and even by then he found a thriving Irish community here. There was a Fenian movement in Montana when he arrived in the 1860s following the Civil War. Many of the soldiers from the Civil War, both from the North and the South, were of Irish ancestry. And Meagher, who had led the fighting 69th Irish Brigade as a general in the Civil War, came and he found this community of Irish in Virginia City, Montana. One of Thomas Meagher's visions for Montana was maybe he had finally found a place where his fellow Irishmen could come and thrive and be Irish. Of course, he had been fighting against rule by the British, the occupation of Ireland, and he brought that spirit to Montana and thought, here, maybe we found a place that we could work on and have some of our Irish sisters and brothers come to find a place to be their own. By the 1870s, Marcus Daly came to Montana. Marcus Daly was became a copper king, a well-known man in the late 1800s. He developed the Anaconda Company, which was one of the largest companies in the world, and he developed it in Butte, Montana, and eventually his sister city, Anaconda, both heavily Irish. Still today, Butte is still the highest percentage Irish per capita in the United States. Within this podcast, we're going to tell that story of the development of Butte and Anaconda and the ties to Ireland.
So in each episode of the podcast, we're going to have different interviews with people from who have entirely different perspectives on the game. People who've played hurling at home for many, many years, and also people who've began playing when they were here in Montana or here in the States and have continued to play and maybe who've moved back home now and still play. Each of them, they tell different stories, very different stories. Some of them would have only started maybe a year ago with the game and who have been introduced to this sort of winning tradition of the Montana Grizzly hurling team.
Somebody noticed I was an Irish and he started talking Irish to me. This is an American. And he started saying, kind of talk to anybody Xylishin. And I was just like, what? Where am I?
You just have your family, you have your tribe when you're hurling in Missoula.
Once we played the first tournament and got into real actual combat on the field, man, I mean, that was it. It's the best sport I'd ever played.
But it's almost like a hidden joke amongst Montanans, like that this place is so good, don't tell anyone how good it is, though. So we want to keep it for ourselves. And thank God I got to find out about it, because it turned out to be the best thing I ever did in my life.
In the merry month of June, from my home I started, left the girl to tune, sad and broken hearted, saluted me father dear, I kissed me darling mother, I drank a pint of beer.
We want to thank everyone who's subscribed and who's followed us so far. We'd ask you to visit our website, ourhurling.com. You can follow us on Instagram, on Facebook. Be sure to share the podcast, tell your friends, tell your family, try promote it as best you can, and we'd be very, very grateful.
We want to thank the wonderful musicians who have so graciously shared their music with us. Owen O'Callavoyne is a very gifted traditional Irish musician. Owen is from Dublin, though his father's from Connemara. He's a really great musician, a really great guy, keeping the old tradition strong and vibrant. You can find out more about Owen on Facebook at Owen O'Callavoyne Music. That's EOGHANNOCEANNABHAIN Music. We're also grateful to the Langers Ball. This is a great group out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. They came to Missoula, Montana a few years ago, and I was lucky enough to strike up a friendship with Michael, and they're just a wonderful band and truly great people. Please check out their website, langersball.com. You can purchase their music there and find out about touring and all the other things Langers Ball is up to. And the Blaggarts. This is such a great band. They're a singular group that defies categorization, but they're pure crack. We're very honored that they allowed us to use their music in the podcast. Check out their website and Patreon page. They even have a new podcast, Slappercast, a weekly talk show with the Blaggarts, where you can learn all sorts of things about the band, music, tours, and what it means to have a properly poured Guinness. We really hope you'll enjoy this podcast. We will be bringing you new episodes every couple weeks, at least to begin with, and loads of bonus content and additional material. We'll be having regular live events, including streaming many hurling matches, but also many other activities we're involved with the Irish in the West. So please make sure that we can take you with us on this journey by subscribing to the podcast. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. We really want to build this podcast around content and not commercials. And so if you could make a one-time donation at our website, ourhurling.com, it would be most appreciated. Or better yet, become a regular contributor by joining us as a patron. You can follow the link to our patron page. Find us at patreon.com/ourhurling and learn how you can support this podcast and hurling in the West. There you'll be able to get loads of bonus content, exclusives, monthly giveaways, and access to live events and so much more. For just a few dollars a month, you can really make a difference and ensure that we can keep bringing you the story of hurling in the shadow of the Rockies.
Rocky Road.